It's not a game, it's a rich thing.
Eyes? All right. Thank you, Druid. Ugh. I changed over to my earbuds from my headphones because the foam is disintegrating. My gosh. I think you guys have seen me go through more headphones than I've worn out shoes in the past however many years. Yeah, so, of course, the software doesn't recognize my earbuds, and, it's always something. Happy Monday! Oh my gosh! I hope you guys had a good weekend. We had some rain last night. I was surprised. I sewed all weekend. My fingers hurt so bad. If you are not a hand quilter, hand sewing, set that aside from hand quilting. Hand quilting is a lot more difficult on your fingies, at least the way I quilt. And because I wear a leather needle, I just struggle with metal ones. The back of the needle went through the leather twice. So I have a tiny little flesh wound that feels like I might as well chop my finger off. So, oh, the troubles of being a quilter. Anyway, I think I mentioned, so if you missed it this weekend, Jill and I had a stitch and glitch. And, the usual tomfoolery. But I had mentioned that I feel like I've quilted and quilted and quilted and quilted, and I'm still nowhere near finished with this quilt. And it's not that big. It's like 42 by 42. It's like with the fabric by that much. I did get to a major turning point this weekend. I think I'm definitely going to be able to finish quilting it, hopefully in the next few days. The difficult quilting is out of the way. Going around all of the little appliques and all of the little 9 patches. Every little 9 patch has a cross through it. And then I just need to do the sort of grid quilting that goes around the edges. So, say a little prayer for my fingies. And I got the massive calluses back on these 2 fingers. I probably need to hand quilt more often, like every other day or something, just to keep these calluses, because they are very difficult. I mean, it's a painful thing. You've got about a week of stabby before you've got the calluses there. And why is that? Because when you do the stitching, whether you do a rocking or just an in and out, you end up like kind of just pricking the tips of your fingers over and over and over, because it's hard to tell if you got the needle through the back, right? Anyway, I was originally going to talk about the Queen's Doll's house today, but I decided not to. I was looking through my pictures, and another thing I think I mentioned was on my trip to England, by the end of the trip, I was already forgetting about things from the beginning of the trip. So I thought, I need to look at and organize some of this stuff. So I was organizing my pictures from Festival of Quilts in Birmingham. And I was like, I really want to look at the Quilters Guild quilt collection. They had this really fantastic display there, exhibit there. And I know everybody's going to love it. It's just, everybody's got a little bit of fondness for 1930s, Depression era, wartime, 1940s stuff. And even if you're not like a big fan of that stuff, I think you can still appreciate the sort of make do and mend attitude of that period. And, it's amazing to me some of the beautiful stuff that came out of that period. The really scrappy stuff. Things that they were doing in England were a little bit different than what we did here, but you also see a lot of overlap. Also, Canada was quite involved, the Canadian Red Cross. So you've kind of got that, like, probably things coming from, North America. So there's maybe some bleed over in from the U.S. into Canada, and then Canada to the U.K. So you're kind of seeing some similar things. So I thought we'd look at that, and if we have time, I promise we're going to get back to the secret of the crazy quilt. But this is a really good exhibit. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot of reading. I'm not going to read you every word of it, but there's a lot to look at. So we'll see. Hey, Robin, happy Monday. Yeah. So I'm trying to think. I don't think I have any major announcements tomorrow. If you're following along with me and Jill in reading Maine Quilts, we have finished the book, and tomorrow on Quilt Nerding on YouTube, we will be interviewing Lori Labar, who is the author of this book. She's a lot of fun. She's already been teasing us about surprise questions and this kind of stuff. So we'll have a lot of fun with her, and I hope you'll tune in. Even if you didn't read the book, she is a wealth of knowledge, and not just about Maine quilts, but lots of other quilt information as well. So I hope you'll join us and to hear her interview. So with that, why don't we look at this wonderful exhibit? So I'm going to read some stuff to you. I've got it queued up on my phone as well as on the screen. So, of course, on my phone, I've made a big mess of organizing things. So let me read this to you while you look at something beautiful. We'll come back to this quilt. It's just, this was probably the most eye-catching thing, but I wanted to show you this, just have something pretty to look at while I read this. So the quilt collection, back up a little bit. The Quilters Guild, so what they've got going on is a very cool thing. But I don't know, there's not really an exact, like one-to-one of what we do here in the States with quilt study and quilt exhibits and all this. We are obviously much larger. We have lots of regional stuff. They're a small country who's about the size of some of our states. So the Quilt Collection, which is a museum and collection, is managed by the Quilters Guild. And I guess the best way I could probably describe the Quilters Guild is like AQS, but they're nonprofit. So when I say like AQS, I'm just trying to give you some apples to apples. We don't like AQS around here because they censor their shows. But just in terms of kind of imagining what the organization is like. So they've got the Quilters Guild. They have, like modern contemporary type stuff. They have contests and they have educational programs, much like some of the larger entities here in the U.S. They have special interest groups. And the British Quilt Study Guild, which is kind of the American Quilt Study Guild's analog, is actually a special interest group of the Quilters Guild. So it's a really interesting kind of organization. They're a nonprofit over there. They call it charity, but it's their tax setup and stuff. So, it's just a very interesting, organization, in the way that they've kind of put all this stuff together, in a way that's different from what we have. So let me read you real quick about the Quilt Collection. And, this book, I've actually had this book for a while. It's called 40, The Evolution of a Collection. And this was the 40th anniversary of the collection. This book was put together by Heather Auden, and I met her. She was the curator of the exhibit, I think, is the right way to, and everybody's titles are very different than what we have over here, but I think I've got it right that she's a curator, and she's possibly like maybe an executive director or something of that nature. But she's been involved for quite some time. They have reached their 45th anniversary, actually. So this book was written a few years ago. But this book goes into some of the items that they have in the collection, and that's some of the things that I saw. And it's just a wonderful, just look at some of these items in their collection. And then I think I'd mentioned I picked up the catalog for this exhibit, and it's got lots and lots of really good information in here. I have to say, what I'm often used to at, say, like QuiltCon and any kind, museum exhibits, often you'll just have this little tiny blurb. But what they've documented with the Quilt Collection is pretty extensive, and so they had some really good write-ups. I'm gonna read you some stuff, but not everything. So anyway, let me read this to you. So the Quilt Collection, keeping the heart of British quilting alive. Quilting has a wonderful and rich history that spans cultures worldwide. It is a beautiful way to celebrate the diversity that makes us all unique. The Quilt Collection is dedicated to preserving and showcasing a varied range of work by a diverse spectrum of makers, from early patchwork and quilting through to the work of contemporary artists. Not only does our collection serve as a gateway to understanding our British heritage and appreciation of our own cultural diversity, it continues to be a source of inspiration for modern-day quilters worldwide. The Quilt Collection provides everyone with an opportunity to engage with history, culture, and the arts in a way that very few other institutions can. So, real quick, let me give you links. There we go. Sorry, we're gonna... Poo. Back to that. Okay, here we go. Sorry. So, should have given these links to Druid. Sorry, guys. So this is the Quilters Guild. That's their website. And then the Quilters Guild Museum Collection. They've got some very easy websites here to remember. Quilters Guild, Quilt Museum, both org.uk. And then I'm going to give you one more link because I'm getting ready to show you something else. And I will tell you what this is in a minute. All right, so, okay, let's get to the meat of this. So they called this exhibit A Stitch in Time. And of course my phone is not in the right order. Let me find it real quick. Okay, so A Stitch in Time, War, Peace, and Needlework Around World War II. So I think some of this could be said to predate the war. Of course, England, being close to Europe, much closer to Europe than we are, they suffered, you know, the sort of terribleness of war before we did. You know, I would say the first act of aggression, or really the only act of aggression on U.S. soil, was the bombing of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. England is getting bombed nonstop. So there are huge swaths of major cities in England that were destroyed during the war. So people there were understandably kind of under, you know, a different level of fear and also rationing. They had to ration probably more extensively than we did, although rationing was in force here. But I do think the Great Depression, you know, the U.S. being an important economic force throughout the 20th century, the Great Depression here in the U.S. did affect the rest of the world. And so I think England, you know, was suffering to some extent from, you know, those early 20th century deprivations. You know, parts of the world really had not fully bounced back from World War I. So, you know, kind of all of the same trials and tribulations we went through, although, you know, the Great Depression, I guess you could say it was on our soil. You know, this time between the two wars was just a difficult time for everybody worldwide. So, you know, I think those of you that are interested in, you know, textiles from this time period, you know some of this stuff. So, you know, I don't know. I'm probably preaching to the choir here a little bit. So this is what they say about this exhibit. This year's exhibition from the Quilt collection commemorates the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War with a display of textiles from the domestic home front, exploring stories of ingenuity, determination, and adaptability for makers sewing in times of material shortage and societal and personal upheaval. Visitors are invited to start their journey on the eve of the war by exploring a range of items made during the 1930s, including several hand-quilted whole cloth pieces made under the Rural Industries Bureau and patchwork pieces showing the typical fabrics and prints of the day. Various household and costume items also demonstrate the variety and popularity of small domestic needlework projects often found in women's magazines of the period. We saw these things too, particularly during the Depression. You know, these little tiny things. You know, you might be making quilts to keep your family warm, but this whole idea of economic deprivation, I mean, you know, you see it again and again throughout our lifetimes even, where the economy's bad, so people kind of, they minimize and economize, but they still have these little splurges. And I think that's what these little needlework projects represent. And I'm going to show you something that I'd never heard of before, and it's so pretty. So we'll get to that in a little bit. The outbreak of war saw dramatic domestic changes as everyday life became geared towards making what precious resources were available last as long as possible. Fabrics and clothing were rationed, and communities were urged to work together to keep the home front going. As the war progressed and bombing raids caused destruction to homes and possessions, the efforts of charities such as the Canadian Red Cross Society became vital, and thousands of quilts were sent over to Britain from anonymous needlewomen abroad. When the end of the war came, a sense of peace and prosperity, and the heralding of a new age of fashionable style, both in clothing and domestic interiors, patchwork and quilting became less popular as they were often associated with making do, and new fashionable and commercially available alternatives competed with more traditional and old-fashioned handmade quilts. As the decade progressed, More women worked outside the home and found that they had less time, skills, and inclination to continue traditional quilt practices, opting instead for the ready-made shiny eiderdown or candlewick bedspread. And so again, this is like not a whole lot different than what we experience here. You know, this kind of, you know, there's prosperity after the war. You know, we have this sense of like, let's go back to normal, but things are more modern, and, you know, we don't need to have these homemade things anymore. So, sadly. All right. So let us look at this. Now, as I approach, it was really cool. They kind of had this sort of in the center of one of the big spaces, and it had, you know, walls around it. And I think I accidentally walked into the back side of it, so I didn't actually get the entry signs until I sort of got to the end and was like, oh gosh, I went through this backwards. But they had this like one whole wall of it, the outside of it was plastered with this. And you know, these are just snippets of information about you know, people and things. You know, so very interesting. I think I really liked the way that they did this very museum like treatment of the space. And then this was the other end of it. You know, things that we've heard: parachute silk for underwear, flour sacks for aprons, flour sacks for clothing, you know. And then this, Stan and Grace, it was, I think you guys would really appreciate this. And that's the last link I put in there. And what Stan and Grace says, Letters of Love and War. And the two women that started this, they're sisters, and Stan and Grace were their parents. And it's just such an interesting thing that, you know, it was their correspondence. And in the beginning, Grace didn't save Stan's letters. So you don't have Stan's end of the conversation. You only have Grace's, because Stan saved them all. But then there comes, and so you kind of get the impression like, she wasn't too into him in the beginning. But then they do end up really kindling this romance, and, you know, the letters, you know, go throughout, you know, this time period. And so this blog that the sisters have put together is, and it's ongoing. It's they're like, not everything's out there yet. It's ongoing, and I think it's weekly that they post. If I remember correctly, I looked at it at some point last week, and it's, you know, it's posting, it's up to date, and I can't remember where they're at right now, but their idea was to post it, I think, to post the postings in the same cadence. So actually, it may be more than once a week at various points, because I think they've kind of set it up for the same cadence that Stan and Grace wrote to each other. And I just thought, like, oh my gosh, how charming and how special, you know, that they could celebrate their parents this way. And I think that, you know, reading some of the information on their blog, they'd said, and I think it's the one sister, I think, that does a lot of the writing, but, you know, she said something to the effect of, you know, learning about her parents before they had children, before they were married, really gave them this whole new, you know, understanding of their parents, the, you know, this like knowledge of their younger parents, the people they never saw. I thought that was just so interesting. And, you know, I mean, stories are part of the reason why we love quilt history. And so, you know, this aspect of this exhibit I thought was so cool. So that's just the Stan and Grace thing. And, you know, it's got little snippets of from their letters and pictures, and I mean, just all kinds of stuff, just really, really sweet stuff. Okay. So as we go into the exhibit, there's so many lovely things. And what's in this case was particularly interesting to me, and it's this right here, and then these little baby booties, and we'll look at these a little bit more detail. But, you know, this is a museum. This isn't just, you know, a sort of a temporary, like, put some things together, you know, put some quilts on the wall. They really curated this very well, and, you know, made it into a museum space, you know, temporary museum space. And I thought it was so fantastic. So you've got like a price book in here. I think these are placemats, you know, just these various little, you know, a little kid's book, and then some advertising materials or salesman materials. Just again, like really precious stuff. This is, let's see, I think I have the info on this. I went the wrong way. Okay. So this is a hexagon patchwork piece. And interestingly, even though some of the pieces in here are going to be, you know, unknown maker, a number of them, they do have the information on them. So this is made by Annie Salkend, née Atkinson. So Annie Atkinson Salkend. I have not done the conversions from metric, but hopefully you guys can imagine. I mean, this piece was, you know, probably a tabletopper. So 61 centimeters by 69 centimeters. This hexagon-shaped patchwork piece was made from very small hexagon mosaic patchwork shapes, which could account for its never being finished. Oh yeah, that's right. This one, I apologize. This was not a tabletopper. This was not finished, and you can still see the stitching. English paper piecing. They're just calling it patchwork. They don't call it English paper piecing. We do. But this is, you know, what we recognize as, you know, wrapping your hexagons and, you know, stitching them and, you know, then stitching them together. Let's see. It uses a range of plain and printed dress fabrics, many of which are silky man-made fabrics, and has been arranged with plain concentric rows between randomly placed sections. Some of the papers are still intact, as are the tacking stitches on the outer green border. It was made by Annie, who lived in Durham. Born in 1893, she was a very skilled sewer, often recycling scraps of fabric into new projects as resources were scarce even before the shortages of the Second World War. So, yeah, this row right here, it looks kind of shiny. It almost looks silvery. If I remember correctly, that's like a silky dress weight fabric, or it looked like, I mean, obviously I couldn't touch anything, but it looked like a dress weight or blouse type fabric, like maybe a rayon or a silky sort of thing, but very pretty. And then this one, this is called Small Squares Top. I think this is another unfinished. They attribute that other piece and this one from 1930 to 1939. This one is maker unknown, 139 centimeters by 182 centimeters. This colorful mosaic patchwork top has been made from small squares of printed fabrics measuring 1 inch on each side and arranged in a trip around the world block design. So often trip around the world here in the States, is usually one big trip around the world. I mean, I've seen things like this too, but these are where she trip around the worlded in blocks and then put the blocks together. So you see there's like this secondary scrappy pattern where, you know, you're getting the corners of the blocks. The thick card templates are still present in the reverse, and the top has not been backed, although it has been neatly finished at the edges. The top features a large range of 1930s dress prints with some furnishing fabrics and gives a good impression of the colors and designs available at the time. So yeah, there's a really wide variety of fabrics in there. And, you know, I noticed there's all kinds of different fabrics. You know, I think that they had, you know, they were using, again, making do. They were using, like, just like we did, scraps of clothing fabrics, you know, woolens and upholstery fabrics. And you have to think about, you know, the clothing that they wore there, you know, due to their climate. There's a lot more woolens and things like that than here. Whereas, you know, you might see woolens in New England a lot. Down in the South, you wouldn't necessarily see woolens much unless it was like a, you know, make a quilt out of pants or an old suiting, things like that. It's not as common. So the bed jackets and the robes, oh my gosh, you guys, so beautiful. You know, these things were made and then, like, clearly never worn. And I just, oh, so beautiful. This, oh my gosh, let me just see if I can zoom in a little bit. I mean, look at this. All of the little details. You've got this meandering quilting on the sort of the facings. This is based on like a Chinese Mandarin type jacket. Hey, word nerd. And then this beautiful, I guess it's kind of like a cherry blossom kind of, just stunning. And then this little pocket detail, the little frog closures. I can't even. It's just the most beautiful thing ever. Just with the love and care that was made with. So, the next ones. So here we have a detail of new quilt prices. So this is the kind of stuff that, getting people to start buying pre-made things. So I think this was kind of this is what's coming once things get better. And then this. So there's a number of items. I think there might be a bed jacket, but then you have this little, I think this might be like a handkerchief or stockings wallet, and then these little slippers, and then there's these little baby shoes. I think I have a better picture of. The baby shoes are also in their book about the collection, the 40. But what this is, I looked at it and I thought, these are really interesting. And I couldn't quite make sense of it. It's called shadow quilting or shadow trapunto. And the way that they do this is it's got multiple layers, but this top layer is literally like a very thin, fine, like organza. So it's almost like a transparent fabric that's on top. And my guess is in this case, we've got like a greenish colored, a very pale green. But then underneath, on top of the batting, they have laid or later stuffed pieces of colored felt or yarn scraps. And you can imagine a society where knitting is often employed. They probably had lots of yarn scraps. Wool is, the home industry. I think that there's no short supply of sheep and wool. So these are things that were more, readily available, and they made these things by stuffing little bits in there. And so I was aware of trapunto, certainly, and I've taken a class in corded quilting, which is kind of a similar concept, but I'd never seen this. And just the care, again, just like that beautiful silk bed jacket, just the care that's been taken here. And obviously these things probably not used, because that top layer of organza or whatever, I mean, it's something that's very sheer. Any kind of abrasion would start to, disintegrate that, or, cause it to break down. So, hey, Jill. So yeah, these were just stunning. I wanted to be able to like touch them and look at them and feel them. But yeah, very cool. So this is 1930. This is pre-war. Maker unknown, 61 centimeters by 91 centimeters. And this is a child's red Welsh whole cloth. 1930. A small red Welsh whole cloth quilt made for a child-sized bed from red and tan cotton sateen. So the back is the tan part, I assume. The traditional Welsh quilting design features a framed layout with 4 beech leaves in the center and a border of diagonally placed leaves with square diamond infill. It has been identified by Welsh quilting expert Claire Claridge as being a Rural Industries Bureau quilt made in Aberdare. So I think that this is probably very similar to like our WPA projects, where needleworkers and other types of other professions were able to keep plying their trade based on some government support. The same design is shown in the Cottage Industries catalog, Quilting Beautiful English Needlework, with the price in sateen listed as £1.06. I think I'm reading that correctly. There is also a photograph of the design in Muriel Rose's sample book for the Little Gallery in Sloane Square, London, and a drawing of the design at the Weymouth School of Needlework in Scotland. The evidence therefore suggests it was made to order or commissioned and sold rather than being a personal piece made at home. Beautiful piece, the very Welsh. And so shillings, yeah, so Bernard, you actually know a lot about this. It's 1 pound, so it's the pound sign, 1.6.6. So is that 1 pound 6? I don't know. I don't know. They're gas signs. I was confused by too. Anyway, but those leaf shapes are very, very commonly seen. Okay, 6 shillings and 6 pence. Okay, so it's 1 pound, 6 shillings, 6 pence. So this is very commonly seen in Welsh quilts. I've taken a class in Welsh quilting. Jennifer Jones is like the official Welsh quilting authority. I have a number of her books, and you definitely see this in the Welsh designs. Oh, this. All right, moving right along. So this is a Muriel Rose Gallery cot quilt. Also maker unknown, 1930 to 1939, 91 centimeters by 145 centimeters. Beautifully hand-quilted whole cloth cot quilt made from cream and fawn-colored cotton and featuring traditional North Country quilted motifs, including a bellows and a flower in the center and a border of roses within circles. It was made for sale through the Little Gallery, a London-based commercial premises co-owned by Muriel Rose. As the co-owner, curator, and manager of the Little Gallery in Ellis Street off Sloane Street, Chelsea, which was known for encouraging artists and selling a high standard of craft work from weaving, printed textiles, prints, and ceramics. So, this would have been like kind of like a gift shoppy kind of thing, gallery kind of thing. But again, like, this beautiful handwork, and you could still buy things like this, or there. And I mean, here in the U.S. too, you could find great cottage industry sort of places. Just unfortunately not as many as back in the day. But yeah, look at this. So I mean, just stunning. And again, these are also, you see Welsh imagery here. You have these little spirals, these elongated flowers, and this kind of wavy sort of a pattern. Bernard, you have one that might be Rural Industries as well, Cole. Yeah. So I just, beautiful work. Okay. Oh, the next picture. I love this. So they had these cute little vignettes, the two vignettes. This one is kind of like a sitting room. You have, you could see me in the mirror taking the picture, but you could see the hand crank sewing machine and just some sewing items. A little tea set over here. There's a tea cozy, the radio, a rag rug, and this beautiful satin pillow. And again, those little tiny things that I guess they just put so much work into. And I just I kind of imagine, I've read a number of historical pieces, historical fiction related to this time period in England, and they were taking shelter like in the tube stations and stuff. They had the brownouts, they had a lot of like kind of spare time on their hands. They were sitting in the dark a lot, I think, but they also, I just think they just had time where they made these small beautiful things. And again, I think about sort of the way things operate here too. You put a lot of effort into something when you need to keep your mind off the bad stuff. So that's what I see these things as being. I've got some close-ups here. So this, I think, again, is one of those like swatch book / this is what you can have made. Coronation yearbook, 1937. And then this is a hand crank singer. And if I, singer was everywhere, obviously, but I also think that there was a little bit of like Canada and the UK had sort of different singer machines than were in the US. So it was kind of a different, I think, distribution and manufacture, what they made for the different areas. Another close-up, and we've got this really cute character print fabric. You can find this kind of thing in quilts and needlework of that time. Here, some books, publications, knitting, of course, ubiquitous. This I thought was interesting. Ottawa Fair, 1938. So this is something that you can find here in the U.S., and it's the Native American Iroquois beading that was very popular in that area in Canada, but down into the U.S. as well. So upstate New York, Niagara Falls, you'd find these. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I did notice, not just here at Festival of Quilts, but also at the Fashion and Textile Museum, I noticed a lot of, not a huge amount, but a significant number of things that are U.S. based that, would sort of be, they're interesting to us, of course, but I think they're even more of like kind of a unique thing across the pond. More bed jackets. Oh my gosh, you guys. Now, my mom has a couple of bed jackets that belong to my grandmother, and I'm 99% sure they were purchased. They were not handmade, but they're very beautiful. But I look at these and just look at them. This is sort of like a crepey kind of silk, with the, and there's sleeve stuff, and this little Peter Pan collar. Oh, so cute. And yes, the blue one. Look at this. Just so beautiful. That is just, and this one's very simple, actually. It's just kind of like a wide A-line kind of top, and then it's got the set-in sleeves, it looks like. Again, I wanted to go up and like just look at stuff and like touch it and model it. So this one I think is blue silk quilted bed jacket, and then the one above is the North Country. That one they did have a name on, Mrs. A. Woods. Here, lovely, lovely quilt. This is a log cabin pattern. Log cabin coverlet. Let's see if there was anything. In this particular log cabin, the blocks have been sewn by hand, joined together, and the seams open and flatten on the back. Seam allowance has been sewn down with a herringbone stitch. Often an extra backing is added to cover the seams, but not in this case. The log cabin block is very versatile, and so on. And so that was interesting to me, that they spent the time sort of herringbone stitching down the back so that there wasn't a lot of fraying, possibly because they didn't want to spare more fabric to make a backing. Think about the kind of the decisions that are made here. It's not necessarily that it's unfinished. It's just they did what they could. They made do because they didn't want to spare more fabric for the back. But very pretty, and very scrappy, but just, I think, it's got a sunshine and shadows look, like a layout. But it's very subtle because it is scrappy. But also, I just think it's well designed. I'm not going to get into like a lot of the reading because it'll take us forever. But they had these really great narratives about the war. So this beautiful thing. So let me read to you about this thing. So this is mosaic patchwork with a padded center, 1930s to 40s, made by Ina McRae, 199 centimeters by 219 centimeters. I think this is like a full-size quilt, if I remember correctly, kind of the dimensions. There are many examples of mosaic patchwork in the quilt collection, but this one is certainly very complex and individual in style. The central circular medallion is of particular interest as it was thickly padded with a coarse open weave fabric on the reverse, holding the wadding in place. It is thought the maker originally intended to make a cushion, but then extended it into a larger coverlet. So I won't read the rest, but the the fact that she started kind of with this and then just decided to keep going, I guess. But this piece, like, it really kind of popped off the quilt. So I think it's pretty obvious, like, this idea of this padded thing, you know, starting off that way and then becoming something else. And a lot of silky fabrics in here, but also I think some cottons. I think like this sort of coral colored in the black. You can still kind of see some of the basting stitches in there. Those were silky and maybe might have been velvet. I can't really remember. I got frustrated with this one because there was this man in there, and you know, he looks and he looks and he looks, and of course, I mean, this just draws you in. But he looks and he looks and he looks, and I'm standing there waiting and standing there waiting. I'm like, I want to look too, and he's standing dead center on it, like right up close to it. Then he kind of backs away, moves over, doesn't move away from it, and then proceeds to read the full page. I mean, and this is like literally a full page. You probably can't see it on my phone, but imagine an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper has 3 big dense paragraphs written on it, and he proceeds to read the whole thing. And I'm like, bro, take a picture. Like, very irritating. So here, this is more of a close-up. I mean, you can see all of these different kinds of fabrics and things. And this kind of greenish, I think this is like a cord, like cording that you see on upholstery. So it really drives home the point that she originally was making a cushion, probably. And yeah, I mean, just like a riot of color. And then she's done things like this. She's taken striped fabrics and pieced them so they make this like really cool concentric square thing going on. She's done this. You know, I mean, yeah. And that's the thing. Like, it's not really finished. It's basted. This is all basting. Like, that's never been pulled out. It's interesting. Let's see if it, you know what, let me read you more about Ina. I know I said I wasn't going to read everything, but so it was made in the 30s to 40s by Ina McRae, born in 1904 and one of 3 daughters to Scottish traveling draper John McRae. After her father's death in 1919, she moved with her mother Alice and 2 sisters, Anne and Joan, from Colchester to Great Dunmow, Essex, to run a haberdashery shop. They returned to Colchester in 1933, and Ina began to make this patchwork using materials from her scrap bag, recycled garments, and remnants from the family business. Unlike her sisters, Ina never married, though she was engaged for a short time during the 40s. The family story is that she broke off the engagement and presumably lost enthusiasm for her patchwork project, leaving it unfinished with papers intact. So yeah. The fact that, you know, again, and not, of course, not being able to handle it and stuff, but the best I could tell was like, yeah, this still basted cushion thing was stitched on. I don't know. I mean, I guess that she was gonna leave, like, if there were papers in there, she's just gonna leave them in there and maybe pull the basting out. I don't know. It was quite something. But I mean, look at this. All of these different, you know, things and treatments she did. You know, there's like a mariner's compass type. There's all of these different, but it's English paper piecing. It's all English paper piecing. You can see. It is not like patchwork pieced, like what, you know, what we recognize as hand piecing. Okay. So here I am again going, this was in the one corner, and then looking back at the cute little sitting room scene, I had to get a picture of this tea cozy. I'm not much of a tea drinker, you know, I'm a nice tea girl, but I just love the charmingness of, you know, teapots and that kind of thing. So this tea cozy, I mean, look at this gorgeous thing. Just beautiful. Now, I'm not going to zoom in. I want you to see the details. Look what we have here. It's a colonial lady. You know my love of all things Sunbonnet Sue. Colonial lady is a sort of considered a derivative of the Sunbonnet Sue. You know, the bonnet. You can't see the face. But guess what? They don't call her Colonial Lady there because it wouldn't make sense. We call her Colonial Lady because, you know, we think, and really Colonial Lady is even kind of the wrong title. You think she's really dressed like a Southern belle, really. But we call her Colonial Lady. Doesn't make sense to use that term. But what do you think they call her? And I may have shown this to you guys, or I think I posted it on my Instagram, so you might already know this. But there, she is called Crinoline Lady. I just thought that was so interesting, like that the terminology. I never gave any thought to it. They love Sunbonnet Sue. In the UK, I know I saw 1 or 2 Sunbonnet Sue things, and also in Japan they love Sunbonnet Sue. So, you know, no surprise that these imageries made it over there, and you know, whether there was the actual patterns or people just saw things. But yeah, Crinoline Lady Applique Coverlet. And it was a child's coverlet, obviously small, very narrow. It had this eyelet lace around it. It was very cute. So, moving on. And you'll notice there's a lot of these long, narrow quilts. And, you know, it's based on the cot, you know, these very small, narrow beds that, you know, were available. And, you know, the bed game over here was a little bit different. It just was. This is a cotton crazy, and something we're familiar with here. You know, you had in rural communities, while the crazy quilting fad was, you know, late 20th or late 19th century, kind of had its peak in the 1880s, like mid 1880s. They were still making crazy quilts here into the 20th century. And some of the later forms, you'll see they're called, like, you know, the farmhouse crazies or the cotton crazies. And it's because they were truly made with, like, discarded clothing and scraps. Whereas, you know, the fancy crazy quilts that we're familiar with from the late 19th century were kind of engineered. They did use scraps, but not in the same way. That this was more of a necessity thing, whereas those were scraps, like I collected scraps from my friends, you know, the dressmaking, and they were velvet and silk and all that kind of stuff. So kind of a different attitude about, you know, what these things were about. So this is called a wartime crazy coverlet. Maker unknown. You can look here and see the details. I mean, very tiny little herringbone and feather stitch. This small crazy patchwork coverlet was made from a mix of plain and patterned fabric scraps, which have been foundation pieced onto plain cotton backing. The seams of the pieces are covered with a decorative herringbone stitch, and the reverse was made from rectangular pieces of dark toned fabrics, all hand quilted in black thread in a clamshell design. So can't see the back, but you can see the quilting stitches. Now this is odd in the perspective that you really often don't see crazy quilts quilted. They are typically coverlets. Ours over here, you might see tied crazy quilts just to kind of keep the front and the back together, but generally you're not going to see them quilted because they were usually made out of thicker stuff. So that was also an interesting aspect of this. And so it just says this was given to the mother-in-law of the donor at some point during the Second World War. And it was used by the donor's husband on his bed as a child. But they don't seem to know, like, where it came from or, you know, who made it. So this is, whoops, did I miss one? No. So this is the children's room. Oh my gosh, so cute. Oh, the little children's things. They even had a window, and you can see looking out the window, there's some lady walking by like, somebody take my picture. But just, oh, so very adorable. And I didn't mention there's lots of these, war era dresses kind of just hanging around, similar to the bed jackets, and we're going to get to the robes in a bit. So this one, this is the Hallville, Ontario Red Cross quilt. And this came from, as you can probably figure, Ontario. So made by the Canadian Red Cross Society. 1939 to 1945, 185 centimeters by 152 centimeters. This is a Canadian Red Cross quilt made from 5 vertical strips pieced together, with each strip made up from horizontal strips of dress fabrics, mainly rayons, in a mixture of designs including dots, spots, stripes, and floral designs. More unusually, the central strip has the embroidered text of the location the quilt was made, Hallowell, Ontario, R-Cross. The original Red Cross label is also still intact on the reverse. And that's something that, when the Red Cross made these quilts, they did have like an official label that went on them. And that's the kind of thing that, you look for in an old quilt if you think it's, related to some organized program. The WPA quilts over here that were associated with organized WPA workshops would also have some kind of documentation on them like that. There's also a very cool recreation of this. And then they had more information, but I won't take the time to read it today. It's another really grand looking quilt, just very bright and cheerful. This one is Miss Treby's quilt. Also made by the Canadian Red Cross. It's made from alternate 16 patch squares and plain squares of orange floral printed cotton. It was one of the 5 given to Miss Alice Treby's family after she returned from evacuation. The quilt no longer has its label, but it's possible that it may have been removed as many people felt embarrassed by the idea of receiving charity. Miss Treby was visited by some Canadian friends long after the war who had in their possessions some leftover fabric scraps used to make Red Cross quilts during the war. Amazingly, some of the fabrics matched this quilt. Isn't that cool? So this quilt, also very lovely quilt. This one is Friends War Victims Relief Quilt, maker unknown. 1939 to 45, 198 centimeters by 209 centimeters. A striking piece, the star blocks in this patchwork sit within squares on point, separated by blue sashing and surrounded by a blue border with yellow squares at each corner. The stars have been pieced together in a crazy patchwork style from various printed cotton fabrics. The piece bears the name of the Friends War Victims Relief Committee, an unofficial arm of British Quakers set up in times of war to relieve civilian distress. It was first established in 1870 following the outbreak of the Franco-Prussian War and revived twice more, in Bulgaria in 1876 and in the Balkans in 1912, before being formally reconstituted at the outbreak of the First World War. It was revived for a 5th and final time in 1940, before its name was changed to the Friends Relief Service in 1941. So, very interesting. I mean, and think about the connections, not necessarily literal connections, but think about Quaker quilts made in the U.S. Quite a number, of famous, well-documented Quaker quilts exist. I remember seeing one at the IQM back in the spring. Made, of course, long before this, but just this idea of these Quaker groups quilting, for relief is an interesting and long-held activity. I took a picture of this because you can see these are like morning prints. So quite possibly some old fabric here. And so here's just an overhead view of the children's quilt. Oh, so cute. Very similar to things you'd see here. Although I kind of think sometimes the way the colors have been put together or just, backgrounds, maybe a little bit different also than the way that quilters here put things together. So just, got a different look to it. I couldn't help but take pictures of the little toys and the Kit Kat, Roundtree's Kit Kat. I think it's a product that's different than our Kit Kats, I believe. but it's got a chocolate crisp. So I'm guessing our Kit Kats are based on this, Roundtree's Kit Kat. And then I took a picture into the baby's, little baby's crib. You see these just adorable little things. Little baby's booties. Smocking, beautiful smocking. You gotta say, British needlework is very fine, very nice. So just some close-ups, the apron, some of the items here. These could have been pulled out of an exhibit here in the U.S. as well. Very, very, like we know these things. So this is a V for Victory, I believe. Yes, V for Victory quilt, also made by the Canadian Red Cross Society, 1939 to 1945. The different designs of each crazy patchwork block in this quilt could indicate it was made by a group of women in the Canadian Red Cross. Blocks were often made at home to standard sizes, then brought into the Red Cross premises, joined together, and finished off with materials supplied in bulk by the society. This one's has been machine stitched and hand quilted, and is backed in the usual striped cotton flannelette fabric found on many Red Cross quilts. Some of the blocks contain a white on red/blue background, letter V, Morse code printed novelty fabric. So I think that is this. See this fabric? Which contains the ... dash inside the letter. These patriotic prints were printed with various wartime themes, endorsed by female celebrities to increase their popularity, and made into clothing. A fashionable and patriotic statement in support of the war. This quilt was given to the donor's mother-in-law, who lived in West Croydon, where her house was damaged 5 times during the bombing raids. 5 times. I mean, what these people endured. I mean, geez. And I mean, you could kind of see, like, it's pretty clear to me. They had access to kind of a central, like, bag of scraps and yardage or whatever. Primarily scraps in this case. So there is this, they're in sync, but they also look very different. So it makes sense to me that these were made, by women and then brought together and put together into the quilt. So, she had an idea here. This person didn't like that floral fabric. She only wanted to use the red, white, and blue. So, and then this is that fabric made into a skirt. And apparently they had this fabric reproduced. So this cotton printed skirt is a reproduction of the original Canadian-made 40s skirt made from V for Victory printed fabric. The original piece belongs to the private collection of Canadian costume historian and collector Ivan Sayers, and features 2 pockets and white buttons. And so this V for Victory extended beyond fabric prints into accessories such as brooches, hat pins, and buttons. And so what's so cute is that, this is a modern reproduction of the fabric, and Heather Auden, who was there, I met her, she was wearing this same skirt. So they must have had, like, multiple ones made up for the exhibit. But so very cute. And I mean, you could see, some young lady wearing this. It's very, very sweet. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but this was something I think also similar to here, to some extent, like your underwear and stuff during ration periods. These things, particularly in England, were required to say, like, let's see. So manufacturers were required to assign 85% of their production quota to utility garments before anything else can be made. So when you find these things that have these specialty labels in them, this shows that, it was not frivolous. It was made under, the rationing guidelines and requirements. And there are certain things here that you'll see as well. And in some cases, I want to say some of that stuff kind of was, you know, sort of the idea brought here from England, you know, in terms of rationing. All right. Oh my gosh, you guys, these robes. Oh, I just about died and went to heaven. So, hexagon patchwork housecoats. This one, maker unknown, 1940 to 1950. This one, the triangle one, made by Charlotte Harris and or Anna Annie Souden. And there's actually pictures of these ladies. This one, a cozy quilted dressing gown, commercially manufactured by Cozy, C-O-S-Y was the name. But I mean, still, even though it's made like industrially in a factory, it's still beautiful. This one's in 1950. So you see this idea of like these homemade things giving way to this like very fancy, you know, silky, plain, colored, you know, not real scrappy, crazy, like I had to throw this crap together, but like this, I have the money now, I can have a, you know, it's not wartime anymore, I can have this fancy item. And then this is the New Look jacket. We'll talk about that in a second. This other one is, I think, another cozy gown, dressing gown. Let's see. Oh, no, I'm wrong. This one was made by Joyce McKee. It's a blue sateen. Let's see this. Yeah, made in the 50s. But, you know, pretty simple. It's just that grid pattern. And then I think there's like a, along the bottom, there's some quilting design. Now, the New Look jacket is very popular, and hopefully we'll get to, I think if I speed it up a little bit, we can get to some students that were inspired by the New Look jacket that did some work. But this is kind of like a crazy quilt jacket that, oh my gosh, I mean, could you not see something like this today? Definitely very modern looking. So this was made by Winifred Childs, and 1948, circa 1948. This intricately embroidered crazy patchwork jacket was made using a Vogue pattern in the post-war New Look style, but the jacket itself still follows the ethos of the previous make, do, and mend era. The crazy patchwork is made from plain and patterned dressmaking fabric scraps, and the lining was recycled from another garment. The crazy patchwork has been elaborately and extensively embroidered and must have taken some time to complete. Even the buttons, two floral painted enamel Victorian buttons, which you can't see very well. There's one right here. Are mismatched and likely from the family button tin. It was made by Winifred Childs for her eldest daughter, Mary, who wore it with a white net dress to a tennis club dance on her first date with her future husband in 1948. Oh, so precious and sweet. So yeah, you can see the button here, but I don't know. I don't know where there's another button, unless these buttons are stacked on top of each other. I'm not really sure. I didn't read that part about the button when I took the picture, or I would have gotten it closer. But I mean, look at this. She has stitched over the floral designs, so it is like just very heavily stitched. And from a distance, you know, it just looks like all this crazy, you know, scrappy fabrics put together. But you can also see the princess seaming of, you know, if you've ever made any garments and you're familiar with Vogue patterns, the Vogue New Look is not something that went away. That these lines, the princess seaming and stuff is I mean, it went on into the 80s. And what is very cool is, here is a picture of her daughter. Now, I feel like the jacket was like a little oversized for this girl. It didn't, I mean, on the mannequin, it sort of looks like a cinched waist. I feel like it's a little blousy on the girl. But just how lovely. And I mean, she was probably a complete knockout in that dress. Now, you kind of wonder, you know, did people at that time, you know, in the 50s, look at something handmade like that and say, oh, it's handmade? Or did they look at it and say, oh my gosh, this is handmade. Look at how, you know, how much work went into this. I don't know. This is just a pattern, little child's pinafore top sort of thing. Here are the rest of the the house coats. Another hexagon one, and then this gold one. The buttons are kind of offset, and it had these like really beautiful swirly like I know, right, Truett? How tiny did she have to? Exactly, because honestly, these things were pretty small. You know, you always talk about people were smaller back in the day. I think in Britain in particular, people who had been born during, you know, the Industrial Revolution, the factories over there, they were smaller. Their growth was stunted from the Victorian age. So yes, I think you did have older people, you know, at this time period that were kind of smaller than, because, you know, rationed food and all that kind of stuff, just people were kind of now malnourished a little bit, with stunted growth from breathing, you know, factory coal smoke and whatnot. But yes, how small must that girl have been, you know, to sort of look a little drowning in that coat, because it was a very small looking coat. It certainly wouldn't have fit me. Look at this. Look at this. Oh, just so beautiful. Let's see. And let me see. Is this one? So this one's made by Irene Morgan. Hand quilted by Welsh-born Irene Morgan. It's beautiful piped edges along the sleeve and collar. Quilting motifs include large feather swirls from the hemline and a square diamond infill. Irene was born in 1905 into a Welsh-speaking mining family. I learned to quilt in 1928 at the Aberdare Technical College in a class set up under the Rural Industries Bureau. So, yes, a very, very skilled needleworker. Nobody ever wore this thing. I mean, look at it. It doesn't look like it's ever been touched. And here are two more bed jackets. This one's more like the bed jacket that, like, my grandmother's bed jackets that my mom has. And, you know, over here, these were like baby boom things. You know, the women in the U.S. were having babies like crazy. My parents are, you know, a product of that. But I guess, you know, this was also an era of, you know, the war's over. You know, we're safe for the time being, and women were having babies again, I guess. So this one, I think, is uh, 50 square patchwork. So this is made of dress and furnishing fabrics, very basic. And let's see, is it, trying to see, I think this one is a coverlet. I don't know that it's actually a quilt. It doesn't say. But right next to it, ha-ha, shabam, look at this. Another crazy dressing gown. I have so many times taken screenshots, you know, as I run into things like this online, and then to see a whole bunch of them together, I was just like, oh, I'm in heaven. So Word and BirdNet says the Rural Industries Bureau's goal was to promote handcrafts, but for some impoverished communities, they help women make money by supplying materials and having the best sewers make products to sell in London. Yeah, so it's like, it seems like it's kind of like that, giving the jobs, you know, kind of like the WPA, but also an aspect of like the, you know, the Freedom Quilting Bee, you know, having products to sell to, you know, in wealthier areas. Guess who this is, you guys? She is not taking any of your shit. You guys, this is Avril Colby. Remember we read her book, I think it was her last book on quilting that she wrote in the 70s, and, you know, she really harped on the history of quilting being used on, you know, as padding underneath suits of armor, you know, chainmail, all that stuff. You know, she really did exhaustive look at that. But this is Avril Colby. She looks not very nice, but I mean, I guess women, you know, I mean, think about Florence Pito. Pictures of her, she didn't look especially welcoming either. So, but as I was reading, this was on like a big poster as I was reading it, I was like, oh, Avril Colby. She looks nothing like I imagine. This is, let's see, I think this is another 50s era patchwork. Maybe. Let's see. Now, I'm sorry, this is a Canadian Red Cross quilt. This is where I think I really failed by going the wrong way through. I think I would have been the correct way through this. This would have preceded all of the Canadian Red Cross quilts. But, you know, very plain, but still pretty. I mean, who wouldn't love to get a quilt like this? Okay, so now on the outside walls, they had something very interesting. So these were quilts made by contemporary quilters and artists. And then we're going to look at some student ones, and that were, they were inspired by. And so this one's called the Bletchley Black and White, made in 2012 by Kate Smith, and it's small, 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters. This courthouse steps log cabin quilt was made by Kate Smith for an exhibition of quilts held at Bletchley Park in February 2012. Bletchley Park, of course, is where Alan Turing worked. You know, this is like the big code breakers. There's been a number of movies. I think one is like the Bletchley Park Girls or something like that, and then the movie about Alan Turing. I can't remember what that machine is called. It's basically like the code breaking machine. And so she chose to represent the work of her mother, Catherine Mary Moore, who joined the WRNS, which is, they don't say what that stands for, in March 1941 at age 19, and subsequently worked at Bletchley Park. Enigma machine, thank you. The Enigma machine. Yeah, so Bletchley Park, you know, that's a big piece of war intelligence history, but also like the beginnings of our computer age. Alan Turing is very important person in the aspect of looking at our, you know, modern computer and robotics and AI. Oh, your dad was a courier for code breaking machines in World War II. That's awesome. How very cool. You're gonna word nerd if you weren't here right at the beginning when I talked about Stan and Grace. You should check them out. I feel like you would really like that story. You know that. So Druid says the most well-known code-breaking machine used during World War II was called the bomb. It was developed by British cryptographers, including Alan Turing, to decipher messages encrypted by the German Enigma machine. The bomb was an electromechanical device that helped to automate the process of finding the daily settings of the Enigma rotors. So yeah, this is like essentially like a mechanical artificial intelligence, like really interesting stuff. But yeah, so Word Burner, grab that link. I can put it back in if the chat is already rolled up. But so Stan and Grace, it was a correspondence between two young people during World War II, and it's just really sweet. And they're the daughters are putting it together. It is currently ongoing, and they're right in the middle of posting. So go. I really recommend all of you go read it. It's just really, really sweet. Just read the beginning parts of it, just to get the gist of what they're doing. You know, even if you're not interested in following along. So I took a picture of this just because I wanted to show that the Quilters Guild is not just this, you know, historical museum / all the things, but also like they do all this other stuff. Much like, I said there's no real apples to apples comparison between what the Quilters Guild encompasses in the UK versus, things we have here. But I would say, again, AQS is probably the closest, like apples to apples, although the Quilters Guild is a nonprofit. But they, here's some cool stuff they're doing. They have these upcoming events. Joanna Germensian, I know her. She is a Canadian quilt historian. She's talking about Red Cross quilts, I think. Yep, Red Cross quilts. So that's something, I'm pretty sure these are events that are online. So if this is something you're interested in looking at, again, I put the links in there. Go check them out. They have, sew-alongs. They have workshops. Virtual meetings. Yeah, absolutely. They just, and they're just really lovely women. And like I said, the British Quilt Study Group is a special interest group of the Quilters Guild, whereas our American Quilt Study Group is its own entity. They are considered a special interest group of the Quilters Guild. There's a whole bunch of special interest groups like miniature quilts and contemporary quilts and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, I just thought they were really fascinating. Like I really think I might join them. Yeah. Okay, so this, I won't spend a whole lot of time on these, but this is a quilt made by the Quilters Guild. This is a 45th anniversary quilt project. It's called Sapphire Street, and it doesn't actually give the size, but this one's pretty big. I mean, you can see it's pretty big. This one I really loved. This one is called Sew a Seam Quilt 2018 by Helen Barnes, 145 by 173 centimeters. She's got there's a poem and everything. Yeah. Oh, the houses, I didn't spend a lot. Let's jump back to the houses real quick. It's not just houses. It's there's other things in here. You've got bridges. I'm sure I saw the London Eye in here somewhere. You've got castles, churches, these little village houses. You've got the oh gosh, I learned so much about these Tudor houses. Did you know that when you look at these Tudor houses, any of them that are really, really strikingly white with the black painted timber, those are actually Victorian glow-ups of the Tudor houses. That black paint, that was a Victorian thing. The ones that have been untouched, actually the timber's still dark. You can tell it's there, but it's much lighter. It's like kind of a grayish color. So that was really interesting to me. I had no idea that they went in and painted, like in any of the major cities, any of that Tudor architecture that was still there. The Victorians painted it all. But yeah, you've got the underground here, and I think that's Ealing Broadway. Yeah. So yes, this is just a fun quilt. Okay, so this one, you should recognize if you have any experience with old textiles from the 40s, early 20th century. I have tons of this stuff. It's a dime a dozen. You can buy this stuff very cheaply. And I really think this is so cool how modern looking this is, the way that the maker chose to lay this out. So yeah, these are decorative cloths made during the 30s to the 50s. And, the worn and stained ones are, at least they had a good life, that they got used. But I think the ones that make me sad is when I see the ones that are in like antique stores and stuff and they're in pristine condition, which is nice, but you're also like, aw, somebody made that and never used it, So you can see the details here. And she has a poem that's around the outer edge. I'm doing okay on time. So this may look familiar. Oh, but wait, it's a little different. So this is a take on the Hallville, Ontario Red Cross quilt, but with a modern twist. So this is called Uprooted, by Mary Whitehouse, and it's from this year. And this is 142 by 119 centimeters. The original Canadian Red Cross Hallville quilt was made by women in Hallville, Ontario, and given to a family who had been bombed out of their home during the Second World War. A quilt signifies warmth, comfort, and security, and the Red Cross quilts also remind us of the kindness of strangers. Here we are 80 years later, and people continue to need help from strangers because they have been displaced from their homes. This distressed quilt, made from newsprint and recycled cotton printed with a photograph of the original pieces, has been made to raise awareness of the plight of refugees who are still being uprooted by war, famine, and oppression. The UNHCR works in 139 countries to protect people who have been forced to flee their homes. Very few of these conflicts make it onto our newspapers, and even fewer hit the front pages. So her work supports the work of Refugee Action York, who work to challenge misconceptions about refugees and asylum seekers and provide support to those seeking sanctuary. And their website is the refugeeactionyork.org. So this is interesting because this is a newspaper and fabric printed with pictures of the fabrics from the original quilt. And then you see then that they've done this stitching for areas where people are fleeing from. So, Eritrea, Iraq, Haiti, Egypt, Russia, Burundi, Venezuela, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Myanmar, Colombia, the DRC, Palestine. I mean, these are all places we know right now, even there is strife. So this is a very impactful piece, I think. And here's a close-up, and you can really see the paper here that's been used. So these are doors. Let me see what we have to say about these. So this is called Guardians. 2004, made by Jenny Dobson. 414 centimeters by 198 centimeters. So pretty big. These are kind of like life-size doors. This impressive contemporary piece was made by invitation for the Shipley Art Gallery, inspired by the artist's immediate post-war memory of seeing doors fixed together to enclose bomb sites in Coventry. As part of the exhibition, the author wrote an accompanying poem in the style and format of Rupert Brooke's 5 Sonnets, 1914, which was written at the start of the First World War. And so you can see, details of these doors. I mean, there's the letter slots cut in. Yeah, these are really, really interesting. The doorknobs. Just very interesting pieces. A lot of the fabric was painted and dyed, and then you can see these little details that they've cut into it to look like the wood is deteriorating, kind of fraying at the bottom. Okay, so now we're moving on to something interesting, and because of course I took the picture of the info about it at the end. So these pieces I'm getting ready to show you, these are illustration and design project with York St. John University. Every year, the Quilters Guild works on a collaborative project with second-year illustration students from York St. John University, which introduces them to our collection and creates the opportunity to feature in our Festival of Quilts exhibition. Students were challenged with a choice of 2 briefs: to create a piece of work that responded in some way to one of the pieces on display, creating or incorporating elements of the works or their story, or to create a range of products with a quilting theme. A lot of them liked the same item. So you're going to see multiple works that are responding to the same item.
The students responded in many different ways, taking inspiration from the historic patchwork and quilted pieces and combining it with their design skills and individual creativity. The project is a fascinating way to introduce a different audience and perspective to our quilt collection and shows how the quilts can inspire different creative processes and work outside the usual textile-focused world. With special thanks to Charlene Clemson, Senior Lecturer in Illustration and Course Lead, York St. John University, and the students for taking time in this work. So this is a banner or some flags, I guess. And they are inspired by, this one's inspired by the triangle dressing gown. And the student is Liza Pink Dangerfield. This piece focuses on the narratives sewn into quilts and the nostalgia they can carry. When researching, the artist was particularly inspired by the tales of quilts repurposed for generations. Once the only thing to keep out the cold during displacement and war, and then becoming another colorful layer to bundle up in when camping for leisure. It was made from the scraps of worn, thin leggings that the artist wore repeatedly when younger and has kept for years in hopes of finding some way to preserve their memories. The triangle shapes were inspired by the triangle dressing gown from the York Quilting Museum collection, which also mixed bold patterns side by side, as in this bunting. The tactility of quilts is a priority here, and in creating this piece, it was important to make something that was not a flat, untouchable piece of work. So this is her own textiles that she has cut up and made into this bunting. And it looks like she's also used kind of some, they look like ribbons, I think, that she's repurposed. So, all right. The next one is this. And these are paintings. So the student is Anya Whitley, and this is inspired by the New Look jacket. These students loved that New Look jacket, so we're going to see more pieces inspired by it. She says, I am pleased with the impact of the work has from a distance, despite being small. The vibrancy of the colors really helped each section pop out. And when at a distance, the four canvases do come together to form one cohesive image. Stepping out of my comfort zone and piping paint, Stepping out of my comfort zone, and I'm assuming maybe using piping paint, was definitely a good decision, as I do think that the impasto technique helps to convey the embroidery and layering on material, while also teaching me lessons for the future and giving me more confidence to try new media. These are definitely elements I would like to work on, such as the consistency of the piping. I learned through the process how important the ratio between the acrylic medium and the paint mattered to the viscosity of the paint, and therefore how easy it was to control. It's a student. I should not. She's got a lot of info here that we probably don't need. My aim was to zoom in and focus on the stitches and the forms they took. To do this, I needed the paint to be piped into the small lines of stitches, but when it was too runny, it ended up not creating these clear dividing lines. I also agreed that extending the piece would add to its impact, as discussed in the critique, and if I had the time, this was definitely something I would consider. Having said this, I do feel the piece still holds its own, being only 4 canvases. So look, they gave her a hard time during her critique, it sounds like. Oh my gosh. The critiques of art school. They will scar you for life. But yeah, I see what she's done here. So she's used this very thick-bodied acrylic paint, and then used like a piping tool to make the what looks like the stitches in these shapes. I think that these pieces are quite effective. I think they're very well done. I think that her artist statement needs some work. But this is I really like these. I mean, you can pick out, and you can see kind of like, I think how they actually could be pushed together, almost into one piece. Okay, so this one's probably no guess needed, is based on the triangle patchwork dressing gown. They also liked that one. So this student is Alex Lord, Triangles Patchwork Dressing Gown. I produced a series of coasters displaying 4 separate sections of the triangle's patchwork dressing gown. I used slate coasters because I think the fact that no two are really the same captures the spirit of the dressing gown, in that it was made from scraps of any material that was available to the creator at the time. The fact that the triangles were so small really instills the idea that there is such a minimal quantity of each fabric left. This piece was made for casual use, not a piece designed to impress others. It is functional first, which is why I recreated the pattern on a functional item. I'll be honest, I don't know that I would say that those dressing gowns were functional first. Particularly because most of them look like they hadn't been worn much. So I think they were decorative first and then function second, in my opinion. It's just me as a quilter. There were so many elements that everywhere I looked I saw something new, and it reminded me of lots of individual memories sewn together over the years. It wasn't meant to be fancy or for show, so I think it is really special that now the whole world can see it. This is why I decided to make these coasters. So I'm assuming these are painted on the slate, as best I can tell. Yeah. So those were very cool. I mean, I think all of this work was very nice. Guess which one this is inspired by. No shade on these students, but it was really clear that they all liked the same thing. So this one is by Chelsea Wantling, inspired by the New Look jacket. Inspired by the New Look jacket to create a painting using acrylic markers and gouache. The idea was to imitate the chaos of the embroidery to translate embroidery into drawing. Her statement. It's really funny how I think personalities come out so much when you've got this type of writing that is not heavily edited. It seems like they probably were just allowed to say what they were going to say. It's so funny. I remember being in art school very vividly. So, but this one, this kind of reminds me of I don't know, some of the contemporary fabric design that we'll see, coming out of different, fabric. Barry J is one that I think of. Helen Dardick she makes some flowers sort of like this. I'm trying to think of some of the other people. I'm blanking on some of the designers, but this would be right at home, I think, in a fabric collection. So this one is by student Eliza Evans, inspired by, guess what? The New Look jacket. Inspired by the embroidered jacket, I created an illustrated poster depicting a wildflower meadow and a peacock butterfly. As an illustrator inspired by nature, I fell in love with the jacket, and the story that accompanied it saddened me. As I am very passionate about fighting against animal hunting, the fact that the original owner was embarrassed by a jacket that her mother handmade her because the fashion was fur coats at the time was upsetting. Okay, that must have been a piece I didn't read about the New Look jacket. Although the jacket was not consistent with fashion trends, I thought it was lovely and felt that the embroidery looked like illustrations that a professional artist would produce. So I'm guessing that indeed, I think I mentioned, what was she embarrassed about this jacket or not? I guess fox fur coats were fashionable at the time, and so instead she had this handmade jacket, and it was embarrassing to her. Today fox hunting is one of those very, I think a lot of people in England are against it. I would say divisive maybe, but I think that's probably more people dislike it than participate in it. I think it's one of those very, you just can't go fox hunting. You have to, some landed gentry has to invite you to fox hunt on their property. So, yeah, I don't know if I missed that, or maybe they were given more information. I'm not sure. I quite likely missed it in the signage. Oh, guess what? The New Look jacket. So this one is by Adam Hare, inspired by the New Look jacket. For the quilting competition, I decided on producing a postcard featuring the New Look jacket as it has been dubbed. Primarily, I was attracted to the stunning use of both texture and color within the embroidery, which seems to depict floral motifs within the scraps of different textiles which make up the jacket. So, yeah, also another interesting, take on this. He made a postcard. I do like his drawing. I have to say, though, maybe this is part of a larger drawing, but I have to say, like, a postcard with what looks like probably colored pencil drawing versus, maybe some of the other work here. I think that, in terms of effort, I don't know. Having gone to art school, I'm kind of like, this one's cool. This is an illustration. And this is the bed jackets and not just the new look jacket or the triangle jackets. So this is by Keeley Palmer Barnes, inspired by quilted bed jacket. And I think this is that beautiful blue one that had the sleeves and little Peter Pan collar. In response to a brief which asked us to choose a subject and write a narrative around it, I made this gouache painting. I went for a vintage bed jacket, which is typically associated with comfort. Its soft embroidery and the quiet environment it symbolized drew me in. A piece of private clothing that is frequently hidden from view. This gave me the idea of a woman in bed, half hidden under a copy of The Well of Loneliness, a book that was banned in the early 1900s due to its homosexual content. Okay, I didn't expect that. The observer is prompted to speculate about her identity by the depiction. Does she yearn for a lady that she can't be with because she's stuck in an undesirable marriage? Is she grieving the loss of her husband, or is she finding herself while he is at war? I maintain the story's ambiguity by hiding her face and placing her mid-read. The emotional tension beneath the surface is juxtaposed. Oh, one of our favorite artistic words, juxtaposed, with the gentle tones of the surroundings. So, Keeley, you've got a future in the art world. You know how to use the juxtaposed word and all of these layers of meaning. Oh, guess what this one is? Not the jacket. I swear when I looked at this one, I was like, oh, it's another of the new look jacket. This one's actually the Wartime Crazy coverlet. So many surprises the students will give you. All right. So this one, the student is Katie Falks, inspired by Wartime Crazy coverlet. I first came up with the idea of making a bookmark with a similar pattern as the Wartime Crazy coverlet, as I love the way the creator had to use scraps and spares of fabric and materials during the war, highlighting the recycling nature in desperate times. My grandma taught me how to use her new sewing machine, and after picking out some random bits of cut-offs she didn't need, got to work with creating a patchwork design like my chosen quilt. I'm really proud of my final design, incorporating recyclable cut-offs from my grandma that she would just end up throwing away to create a cute mix of fabrics for a placemat. I also added zigzag stitching, similar to the stitching on the chosen quilt itself. So this, I'm still kind of struggling to figure out what it is she did here. I think I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I think these are photographs of what she did. So, and I'll be honest, to me it looks more like the new look jacket. And so that, I believe, is the last one. So, what do you guys think? I was just honestly so in love with what they did. This, and I just gave the students a little bit of a hard time. But I really love the way they put this together with, the collection, these pieces from the collection, those little vignettes, and, all of this idea around, Men to Make Do, the history, the garments, and then the students, and then, the handful of quilts that were made by guild members that kind of dovetailed into this. I thought were pretty awesome. Let's see if we can find, let's see if the Needlew jacket is in here. I kind of thought it was. Ah, here it is. Yeah, they must have had different they must have had more information, because as I'm looking here, the information about the Needlew jacket did not have the piece about the fox hunt. So I'm guessing they had more data than has been printed for the exhibition, because it doesn't have any information in here about that. But yeah, I mean, and you can kind of see here, I'm holding this up, how the jacket it nips in the back, so Mary Childs must have been a really tiny individual, that this jacket kind of looked big on her. So let's see. Yeah, that was all the information they had about it. So, well, I have to say, there was a handful of things that I just would put, the pinnacle of my visit, and I would say that this exhibit was one of them. Just in looking at it. Here is actually something that I didn't notice before. It's talked about shadow quilting, and I think I did not get a picture of this dressing gown. It looks familiar, so I'm pretty sure it was there, and I think I just missed it. But this gives more information about shadow quilting, and so let me read it to you, because I think maybe I don't know, my description may not have been good. So it says, shadow quilting is similar to corded quilting or trapunto. The design is sewn and the area stuffed with brightly colored wool, which shows through the delicate top layer of fabric in muted pastel shades. It is a technique we tend to find the most in the 30s, and has been used here to create this beautiful and decorative dressing gown, which has floral and leaf design along the fronts, lower back, and sleeves, and scrolls along the edges and hemline of the gown. Bed jackets and dressing gowns, along with other small domestic objects, were popular projects to be made at home, and were printed in women's magazines, complete with instructions and iron-on transfers of the designs. Interesting. I mean, I knew that this was promoted in women's magazines, but the fact that there were iron-on transfers. So I do know the one thing I did not get a great picture of, but that I will show you, I know is in the book here. And I have to say, some of the stuff that they have in their collection is just, I mean, gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. Just bear with me and I'll show you a couple of them. I mean, some of their quilts are just drop dead gorgeous. All right, I know I saw them in here earlier today. Where are you, little baby shoes? Maybe a... Alright, maybe I'm thinking of the one in here. Ah, here we go. So this is still not what I'm thinking of, but you can see here, this is a better picture of these little baby shoes than what I could show you in the case that they had. But this is not, I'm positive these are in this book, because it said, had some more information about them. I will find them, you guys. Oh, here's the book. Oh, Shadow Quilting with Marjorie Puckett. Okay, interesting. I'll have to check that one out. Ah, here we go. Yeah, this is the good picture of them. so you can see. And it's really, you know, honestly, up close, it's hard to tell. Like I wasn't sure whether the fabric had been like painted or dyed in some way. If it was printed and that it had been stitched around, I really was not clear to me. But then, you know, then having read about this, you know, and it says particularly of these baby slippers, it's unlikely that they were ever worn and are more a keepsake than a practical item. Due to the nature of the delicate fabric used on the top layer, shadow quilted items didn't always stand the test of time and are especially vulnerable when the high relief of the internal stuffing puts pressure and wear on the fabric. It does, however, allow a glimpse of the bright internal colored wools in contrast to the pastel tones of the intended finished look. So we believe we call those opportunity holes when you can see the innards of a quilted item. But yeah, let me just show you a couple of quick pictures before we end here today. So one thing I wanted to show was Avril Colby samples. So these are samples of Avril Colby from Avril Colby's collection that they have. And then of course, you know, I showed you the picture of her. I thought that was interesting. So she made these things. She was a fussy cutter. So you can see that, you know, she very carefully cut to make these hexagons. And I especially love this one, this heart-shaped one, because it's like individual blossoms were fussy cut. You know, in this little pin cushion. I mean, look at this. She fussy cut these individual little blossoms. So very cute. So yeah, they have, I highly recommend this book. Like I said, I bought it directly from them a couple years ago. I bought some of the Quilt Studies journals from the British Quilting Study Group. It doesn't have the price, but I think it was fairly affordable. And my mom and I bought, I think I told you guys, they had the book, this book, and then this little Make, Do, and Mend reprint for, like, you could buy all three together. And I gave the extra copy to my mom. But yeah, that's the one thing I have to say. Like, all of the nonprofit / like I think I mentioned the National Trust stuff, like they had really good educational, informative books that were not crazy expensive. Like they were affordable. You know, I know often I will, you know, want information about a collection, or I'll see a great book about a collection, and, you know, it'll be like 600 pages and weigh 50 pounds and cost like $120. Like these are like more affordable, like nice little copies. So look at this thing. This is a Cigarette Silks tea cozy made in the 20s. I mean, look at this thing. You can see all the embroidery stitches, and it's kind of, you know, this clumpy around the edges. Yeah. Yes, Shadow Trapunto. Yeah. I found a number of references when I was looking as well. This is the Jubilee quilt. My God, look at this. Look at this thing, you guys. I don't even know how. Yeah, the blades of these things are like braided, like a braid quilting, and it's where you're piecing like this. They're kind of like at an angle, and it almost looks like a braid. So that's what the blades of this flower, you can kind of see. And it's made out of something silky, like silks or satins or something. Let's see. There's one other one where I was like, oh, this. The 1718 silk patchwork coverlet. They own it, or they are caretakers of it. There's a book about this. It is a very old piece of patchwork, of course, 1718. I think there's literally not a whole lot known about it. It was purchased at auction 2000 in Oxfordshire for the Quilters Guild Museum collection. It came from the Brown family, whose ancestors were farming gentry from Aldbourne, Wiltshire. Let's see, skill is demonstrated by accurate piecing and 15 to 20 inches, stitches to the inch. So, Word Burner, this is the book. 40, The Evolution of a Collection. And this is the British, or the Quilters Guild Quilt Museum. Yeah. So wonderful. But I'm pretty sure you can still find this on their site to purchase. Oh, the Kent uniform coverlet. This is another one that you might have seen before, and it's made out of uniform pieces. Is it from the Crimean War or something? I'm trying to remember. It's from the 1870s. Indian Army officer and later a policeman. Okay, so yeah, I guess this was not Crimea. This is just a guy who had... Yeah. I won't read the details, but yeah. Okay, I think that was like the primary things. I mean, they have some really stunning English paper piecing type stuff. Like just a bazillion little pieces. So I won't bore you with those because those are microscopic. Although this patchwork bikini from the 1970s is pretty darn cool. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I am going to toddle on off because I've got a meeting soon. So have a fantastic week. I hope you will join us tomorrow night on Quilt Nerding on YouTube as we interview Lori LaBar. And definitely check out the links I shared with you. And if I don't see you tomorrow night, I hope to see you on Thursday. I think Thursday, I know I said I was going to do the Queen's Doll's house today. I think I'll do it on Thursday unless, I get a wild hair and decide to do something else. But yeah, the Queen's Doll's house still just, gobsmacked. So yeah. So yeah, have a nice week. Stay cool. Absolutely. It is hot here. I'm tired of summer. I've been tired of summer since the day we went over 90 degrees. All right, guys, have a super week, and I will talk to you soon. Mwah, 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 mwah.